In this section, we'll be discussing the Peloponnesian Wars. So, first of all, we need to talk about the results of the Greek victory over the Persians. On the positive side, this left room for the development of participatory government. If the Persians had been victorious, that might have been the end of democracy. Right? The Persians had crushed the Greeks. We would have maybe said, well, democracy is not really very good. It couldn't protect the Greeks. It's really much better to be something big and powerful like the Persian Empire or to be a part of it. However, because the Greeks, which were much smaller and theoretically weaker than Persia, were able to win, that's a plus for democracy, saying maybe democracy is something we should think about. In addition, as we'll talk about later, this led for the development of Greek philosophy, Greek thought, and that's particularly important because that helps lead eventually to the scientific revolution. But there's also a problem. The Persian invasion had, in a sense, brought Greeks together. Are they going to stay together? Is one group going to dominate Greece, or is it just going to kind of go back the way things were? Well, for a while, it looks like Athens is going to be the one that's going to draw Greece together. They are afraid, all Greeks are afraid, that the Persians might come back. You'll recall that, after Darius had invaded and failed, he was defeated at the Battle of Marathon, you'll recall, his son Xerxes would try again. There's no reason why the Persians can't try again. They have a lot of resources. The Persians can rebuild armies. So there's a fear that the Persians might come back. And the Athenians are particularly nervous about this because you'll recall that the Persians had done a huge amount of damage to the city of Athens. Remember, the Athenians had actually left the city to seek refuge behind the wooden wall, that is, the ships. But Athens does still have its navy. Right? The Athenian navy crushed the Persians at Salamis. Their navy is still there. So they've got some power. They're afraid. So they're going to respond by starting to form this thing called the Delian League. Right? They're going to start forming this thing called the Delian League. And this makes a lot of sense because there's a fear that the Persians might come back. And a lot of Greeks said, yeah, we'll join up with you. Because we know that if the Persians come back and they conquer you, we're next. So it looks like what's going to happen is that you're going to have greater union following the defeat of Persia. Maybe we're on the way to building a unified democratic Greek superstate in a sense. So you've got Athens now leading this league. But what's going to happen is the league is going to become something of an empire. The Athenians will eventually use the league to serve their own national interests. So the members of the league, which theoretically exist to protect themselves from the Persians, have to send resources to Athens, have to send money and other resources, so that Athens can build up its navy, build up its military, to protect them from any possible Persian invasion. Now, of course, Athens uses that military to see to its own interests. So Athens is sort of like becoming an empire, but not over other cultures, but over other Greeks. Right? Under this idea, the Persians might come back, you need to support us, you need to give us money, you need to give us resources. And then Athens can use that to build up its military, especially its navy. That gives Athens a lot of power. And it's going to use that to increasingly dominate trade. Right? The Athenians are going to increasingly dominate trade. They've got the navy. They've got the Delian League. They've got this kind of growing empire. So Athens is becoming increasingly wealthy and powerful. And the Athenians will celebrate this. Right? They're going to try and glorify Athens. And you can see that in their art and architecture. So you may have heard of the Parthenon. It's a huge temple to Athena. Unfortunately, the gigantic, beautiful statue of Athena has been destroyed. But this image here is meant to be an approximation of what it might have looked like. But you can see the ruins, which are very impressive, right? You can see the modern city of Athens surrounding the Parthenon, which is still impressive despite, being half fallen apart. So the Athenians are going to become increasingly wealthy, increasingly powerful, and increasingly confident of the greatness of Athens. And they, in a sense, start throwing their weight around a little bit. And we know that Greeks don't want to be dominated by anyone, even other Greeks. So what happens then, even though Athens is going to enjoy something of a golden age, they're eventually going to go into decline. Members of the league are angry because they can see quite clearly that the money and resources that Athens is extracting from them is not so much going into defense against the Persians. The Persians aren't actually much of a threat anymore during this time period, but are going to make the Athenians more powerful and more wealthy. And Sparta in particular starts to feel threatened. Right? Remember, Sparta is this conservative, insular society that's very jealous of its independence and wants to maintain its own security. And it's concerned that Athens might start to try and dominate it. And what this means then is Athens has made, in a sense, the most powerful land army in Greece feel threatened. Right? The Athenians have a great navy, but the Spartans still have the best infantry. And because Sparta feels under threat, because there's all this frustration and anger with Athens, we will eventually get the Peloponnesian Wars. I believe there's like 3 of them. I'm not going to go into all of them, but basically this is a war between Athens and its allies and Sparta and its allies, and the Athenians lose every single war. Right? Athens loses every single war and is absolutely devastated. Sparta is victorious, right? Sparta wins. However, Sparta isn't going to try to replace Athens. Sparta is not going to try and build up its own empire, really. It's not interested in doing that. Remember, we talked earlier how the Spartans don't really want to pull their army out of Sparta because they're afraid of a Helot rebellion. So Sparta's character as a slave society, which is obsessed with keeping its army around to put down slave rebellion, isn't interested in seeking to replace Athens. This isn't wars to see who will be the dominant force in Greece. It's whether Athens will be dominant or no one will be dominant. Right? It's not a fight between Athens and Sparta to see who's going to be leading Greece. It's a fight between whether Athens will lead Greece or no one will lead Greece. And so what happens then, there's no dominant democratic or other Greek empire uniting Greece. Right? Greece was on its way, in a sense, to becoming something like the Roman Empire, a single unified state. But instead, it's going to stay divided politically, though united by culture. And what this means is when the Greeks finally are unified, it's as part of someone else's empire, Alexander the Great, who thought of himself, in a sense, as Greek, even though he was Macedonian. But that's someone we'll talk about later.